half of a skull right next to the rock.
An unusual find along the river on a fishing trip is a mystery local authorities are now working to solve. You just heard from one of the fishermen who made that find.
Now, as Carly O'Keefe reports, authorities are trying to figure out where it came from and where it needs to go next.
Two Scott County brothers say they've seen the river dredge up all kinds of stuff as they've been fishing on the banks of the Mississippi here by the SEMO port. But a recent fishing trip turned up something they never thought they'd find.
I guess it had washed up when the flood season happened, and I found it when the water went down.
They barely had time to figure out if the catfish were biting when a day at one of their favorite fishing spots took a very unexpected turn.
I casted my pole out and I went to stick it in the rock up here, seen something round, and I thought it was a really round rock, which is weird down here because all the rocks are real jagged. And I was like, that looks like a skull.
The brothers, who've asked us not to use their names, immediately called the sheriff's office.
It was about in this area, like around where that debris is.
Cape Girardeau County Coroner Craig Williams got involved because it in fact was part of a human skull.
Pretty much the top cap, frontal part missing.
Williams says while it's often difficult to tell the difference between human and animal bones, in this case it was pretty obvious. But that was about the only straightforward thing about this case. The bigger questions, like how old is it and where did it come from, will be much trickier to answer.
Typically when human remains or bone fragments are in the river, they switch to like a brown hue. All the edges, nothing was sharp, they were rounded off. So that tells us that the erosion has happened for quite some time.
But Williams says there's no way to definitively know by looking at a bone just how old it is, which is why he turned to Dr. Jennifer Bengston, an anthropologist with Southeast Missouri State University.
I would say that at least 4 or 5 times a year, I get asked to assist with bones that have been found by the public and turned over to law enforcement.
All the pieces you see here are models she uses to train her students. But when it comes to the real thing, Dr. Bengston is an expert at unearthing the secrets bones hold. She's helped to identify several sets of human remains whose identities were unknown, some a mystery for 40 years or more. But her body of work stretches much further back into history than that.
I have seen some bones where the preservation was so exquisite that I assumed that this would be a modern forensic case, and it turned out to be actually thousands of years old. And I have had the opposite of that situation as well, where bones were in such terrible shape that the preservation was bad that I assumed they were really, really old, and they turn out to be more recent.
If Dr. Bengston can narrow down an approximate age of the skull, that will guide her next steps.
One of the primary questions that we have to answer is it more of like a modern kind of forensic situation, or is it potentially a historic or archaeological case?
If radiocarbon dating can determine the skull predates European settlers, the skull will fall under the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act, also known as NAGPRA. It stipulates that Native American remains, funerary, and sacred objects must at all times be treated with dignity and respect, and, if removed from their resting place by any means, returned to their descendants.
Which is particularly applicable to remains from, most of the time, archaeological sites, where these remains represent the ancestors of contemporary Native American communities.
In the heartland, we are surrounded by archaeological sites. In the 90 or so river miles between Ware, Illinois and Fulton County, Kentucky on both sides of the Mississippi, there are more than a dozen documented archaeological sites of Native American significance, and likely many more we don't know about.
Water and the river is a powerful force. It can move things great distances, it can erode riverbanks, it can deposit sediments and change the landscape in really drastic ways, and sometimes indeed that does affect both kind of ancient archaeological as well as more historic and modern kinds of burials.
The river isn't the only thing that can put ancient burial sites at risk. There's a far more nefarious cause capable of doing even more damage.
Speaking with the Bureau of Indian Affairs and talking with them, there is a really high market for Native American culture. If it's remains, arrowheads, pottery, anything.
Fulton County Deputy Matthew Quimby learned about that black market artifact trade after he says a trespassing call earlier this year led him to 2 men actively digging into a Native American burial mound.
You have your center mound, you have 2 mounds here, you have another mound in this area.
According to the citation Deputy Quimby issued that day, the men had a shovel in the back of their truck and it had fresh mud on it. There were bones in a backpack, in their pockets, and in the cup holder of the vehicle. The citation further states the men told Deputy Quimby that they knew it was a burial mound and that they knew what they were looking for.
Just for someone to, first of all, enter upon private property and then to desecrate a burial ground in search for objects for either their own personal use or to sell or use in any other way. We take that very seriously here in Fulton County.
That case is working its way through the courts now, but Deputy Quimby's investigation is far from over. After the 2 initial arrests, he says new, empty holes were discovered at the same site months later, meaning there may be more arrests to come. And once the remains are no longer evidence, they will not be returning to the mound from which they were pulled.
The Cherokee Nation says that it is their ancestors. So once the investigation is over with, they will actually be coming down and retrieving the remains and taking them to bury them in a sacred place.
Dr. Bankston stresses whether the mighty Mississippi or some other force unearthed the skull the fishermen found at the SEMO port, it will be handled with dignity, and every effort will be made to lay it to rest once again.
All humans, dead or alive, and no matter how long ago they died, they and their bodies deserve our respect.
Authorities say those fishermen by the SEMO port did everything right by calling authorities and reporting it immediately. However, it could take months to get any answers about the origins of that skull.